Prior to the change in tariffs, the average tariff on goods, not all, just goods from Europe to the United States was 2.3%. As a result of the trade agreement that was struck on July 21st, that trade average tariff moved to 13.1%. So you can see that there is a clear difference north of 10%. I'm mentioning those numbers because in the baseline that we built in our June projections, so prior to the July 21st arrangement, we had assumed for purposes of our baseline a 10% tariff that would apply to the shipment of goods or the sale of goods from Europe to the United States. So our baseline was a little bit short of what it was effectively the impact of the new trade policy. That 13.1% applies to about 40% of the imports from the United States because of the size of the movement of goods between Europe and the United States. For us, it's a much reduced volume because the United States represents about 17% of our total trade. So it's always a bit risky to try to make an assessment of exactly how much it will impact. But so far, our staff has calculated that as a result of this additional tariff on the shipment and sale of goods between Europe and the United States, the impact would be on the activity a reduction by 0.7 percentage point cumulatively between 25 and 27, so over a period of 3 years. That's the estimated impact relative to what it would be absent the tariffs. Okay. Obviously, I'm saying that under the assumption that the cap of 15%, which has been negotiated under the EU-US tariff deal struck on July 21st, applies as a cap, and that any investigation that is conducted under Regulation 232 of the United States, which goes into really determining what rates should apply, will be capped by that 15% overall cap. So it seems to be the case for pharmaceutical products, apparently. Seems to be the case with the automotive industry and the spare parts. It's not necessarily the case for kitchen cabinets and other kitchen equipment. But there is always, despite the fact that this trade deal was enforced, there is always a degree of uncertainty that is remnant or recurrent, if you will, under the current regime. However, more explicit it is for the European Union than it is, for instance, for the UK. I think that's what I wanted to clarify. I hope it's clear, but...
Yeah, and on fiscal side, because you also had experience in your past life, removing such a high structural deficit as we can see not only in western part of Europe but also in Central Europe, where some countries are probably around 4% of GDP. This is kind of challenging way. Obviously, you can reduce this deficit the way like Greeks did it for very high social price. But how difficult it would be to get it into the order, and if it's not in the order, what could be the consequences for growth and stability of EU if countries will be stuck with very high structural deficit?
Well, I think notwithstanding the tariff, notwithstanding the uncertainty, there is a fiscal framework that has been agreed and to which all members of the European Union are expected to adhere. Now, not all of them are there, and there is clearly a degree of investment that will affect the fiscal position of many member states, because you have the conflicting commitment of the fiscal governance on the one hand and the determination to invest in order to satisfy the requirements under NATO. And how these two are going to advance in parallel and how much of the escape clause will be sufficient in order to cover the gap between the two is something that, is going to be for the countries and for the Commission to assess. But for macro purposes, we assume that there will be, on the part of all those countries that are very short of their commitment to NATO, that there will be investment in both defence and infrastructure over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. And some of it beginning to apply in the late 25, but really in full force as of 26.
Thank you.